George Galloway and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
Welcome to the mother of all talk shows, coming to you live from the lands of Genghis Khan. Work that one out. Well, it's the 11th hour. It's not midnight yet, but it's getting there. In the Caribbean, where the massed ranks of the US Marines and the US Navy and the US Air Force seemed ready to launch a war on the most bogus pretext since Hitler claimed that Poland had invaded Germany. It's the 11th hour in Florida, where in a 2-hour meeting, that's all it took, Witkoff and Rubio appeared to have solved the territorial issues, at least in the Ukraine conflict. And Witkoff will be meeting President Vladimir Putin tomorrow, or at least heading for Russia tomorrow. And it's the 11th hour for my old friend Jeremy Corbyn, who laboured mightily to produce a new socialist party in Britain, but looks like he will not now get the chance to lead it. It's all coming up. It's the mother of all talk shows. Stay tuned.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
First, a word of thanks to my good friend Tucker Carlson, the world's preeminent broadcaster, a man who regularly broadcasts not to millions, as we do here, but to hundreds of millions of people. This titan of television and broadcasting interviewed me just earlier this week, and it was aired on Friday. And the response has been absolutely phenomenal. And many thanks, and I'm very touched that so many of you were moved by the story that I had to open up with about the fact that we are now in the lands of Genghis Khan. The number of people who wrote to me with medical tips and suggestions and offers of their accommodation in Ireland and Spain, in all kinds of places, really genuinely moved me. This interview had been in the works for quite some time, since my good friend tarareade introduced Tucker and I and pushed for me to be interviewed by him, and I'm grateful, Tara, always, forever, for that. The fact that we now have an audience even larger than it was, we'll see in the next few days just how much larger, is due to the exposure given by Tucker Carlson and his interview. If you haven't watched it yet, I commend it to you. It's only 38 minutes. Most people wished it had gone on for longer. Some ask for a round 2, and I'm ready for both of those. But the main takeaway from the issue that we were discussing, or the issues that we were discussing, is the cross-dressing in the political arena. I take no pleasure in saying that the Your Party conference in Liverpool was a circus. Certainly there were plenty of clowns, 1 or 2 big beasts, but the most ridiculous ending possible was contrived. Jeremy Corbyn is the most significant socialist political leader in Britain in the 21st century. The great man Tony Benn taught he and I everything that we know. Jeremy Corbyn laboured mightily to produce a party with all around him squalling and squawking, people strolling on to the conference stage and informing us of their personal pronouns and their sexual proclivities and their demands for trans liberation and all the 57 varieties of ultra-left extremism in Britain, all did their best to wreck Jeremy's conference. Of course, they wouldn't put it that way. That's Joseph behind me. We may talk about him later. Joseph, with the multicoloured headwear, was just one of those extremist cranks, comic singers, who did everything that they could to spoil the launch of what might have been a socialist party that could have gone somewhere, could have been a contender. Whether it will now be is obviously a matter for the future, and personally I hope that it will be. Now that they are allowing dual membership, I'm sure that members of my own party will join it, although maybe the dual party whitelist will only include parties way to the left of us. We'll see. But I feel very sorry that my friend of more than 40 years, Jeremy Corbyn, will now have to retire to his allotment, having prepared the ground for the launch of this party. The members of the party voted narrowly, almost a toss of the coin, that he would not be the leader, would not have the chance to even stand to be the leader. And that's a tragedy. The members have retired their best and greatest asset. The country is not ready for Joseph of the multicoloured headgear. The country is not ready for a collective leadership which will not include either Mr. Corbyn or Zara Sultana. By rule, they will not be permitted to run, to be a part of the collective leadership. They have retired their greatest asset. They have dropped the pilot, the most recognisable man on the left in British politics, I say modestly. The man who raised the Labour vote in 2017 by the highest number of votes ever recorded since 1945, and the Labour landslide victory of Clement Attlee. The man who packed them in, chanting his name in auditoria all over this country, will not now be the leader of the Jeremy Corbyn party. It's going to be called Your Party, which was, I suppose, the best of a rather limited collection of names that were offered to the membership. I'm still waiting for the result on the vote on whether members of Parliament have to accept the average worker's wage, a long-standing far-left demand. If it has passed, I predict that until the next general election at least, they will not have many members of Parliament standing in their colours, speaking from the floor of the House in their name. If you tell a member of Parliament that he's going to have to cut his wages by 2/3, I suspect you'll get a rude reply from most of them. In fact, 2 of the 5 have already left and may well be followed by others. But I'm not concerned about them. I'm not concerned about the wages of members of Parliament, for I'm not one and will not be one again. I'm concerned, though, for Jeremy Corbyn. I have no idea what he's going to do next, but I wish him every success and happiness in the rest of his life. Not that I owe him anything, quite the contrary, but I nonetheless sincerely mean what I have just said. It is the 11th hour. It's the 11th hour in Venezuela. The mass of the Venezuelan people are now armed. They're armed with small arms, they're armed with anti-tank weapons, they're armed with shoulder-borne anti-aircraft weapons, they are armed with artillery, they are armed with RPGs, they are armed with grenades. They are armed with every piece of weaponry that you would need in a guerrilla war, which may very well begin even in the course of this program. As someone famously said, I think Garland Nixon, my good friend from the United States, Venezuela is jungles and mountains with jungles, as well, of course, as the narrow alleyways of Caracas and other towns and cities in Venezuela. It has millions of people now under arms, and they are waiting for a Yankee invasion, which Donald Trump, the peace president, the no new wars president, the man who wanted to talk and negotiate on 8 or was it 12 different wars, the man that was ready to talk to the little rocket man, Kim Jong-un, the man that was able to negotiate with the Ansar Allah armed forces in the Yemen, the man that was ready to talk to Iran is not ready to talk to President Nicolas Maduro. He says he is, but only to tell him that it would be better if he now left the country before President Trump was forced to kill him. The pretext for this imminent invasion of Venezuela is, as I said in my introduction, the thinnest since Adolf Hitler claimed that he was invading Poland because Poland had invaded him. And he had even strewn some corpses on the German border, claiming that they were the victims of Polish aggression. Everybody laughed at that pretext then, but they're not laughing now, because it was the precursor to a global world war, World War II, which left almost 100 million dead and overshadowed the world for most of the time that I have been alive. What's overshadowing us now is the danger not of World War II, but of World War III, which of course will leave no survivors at all. No one will have their lives shadowed by the outcome of World War III. Everyone will be dead. There will be some who will have purchased some subterranean nuclear shelter, but it will not have been worth the money, worth the trouble. Because even if you ever emerged from it, you would emerge to a nuclear winter which will blight all life for all time on the planet Earth. I'm not exaggerating about that, though it seems to me sometimes that people think I am. Well, if I tell you that Venezuela may well have acquired a nuclear weapon in the course of these months that Donald Trump has been threatening it, you'd realize just how dangerous and how close the world would then be, if that turned out to be the case, would then be to a nuclear exchange in the Americas. Russia is a close ally of Venezuela. So is China. So is Iran. And so is the DPRK, North Korea. And it is reported by sources that the DPRK have provided President Maduro and the legitimate government of Venezuela with a nuclear weapon which they may use in defense of their country if Donald Trump invades it. Now, I have no way of knowing the veracity of that story, but I do, of course, know that if they have such a weapon, Venezuela would be entirely legally entitled to use it. Donald Trump's pretext for invading a sovereign country, violating for weeks, if not months, the sovereign waters of that country, illegally declaring a no-fly zone over that country, telling all aircraft not to fly, beginning a series of terrorist attacks against the infrastructure of Venezuela, and openly openly from the Oval Office, threatening to invade Venezuela, gives Venezuela the absolute right of self-defense with any means necessary. Do people understand that? Do they understand that Venezuela will fight, and that they will fight for years, long after Donald Trump and the Nobel Peace Prize President Machado is installed in the Miraflores? Believe me, the Venezuelans will fight, and their children will fight, and their children will fight, because these are the people of Simon Bolivar. They did not seek to unite Latin America. They did not drive out the Spanish colonizer so that a Yankee colonizer could take their place, so that their oil, their gold, their minerals, their precious things, their precious land and waters can be exploited by Donald Trump's cronies. Are you crazy? You must be, if you think that this is not going to turn into a Latin Vietnam. I've been watching a lot of movies about Vietnam this week. It's true that the United States was able to deal devastating violence on Vietnam and Cambodia and Laos. They were, from the sky, well able to eviscerate millions of human beings, to soak the jungles of Vietnam with chemical weapons and napalm, setting the jungles alight, and the deforestation and the birth defects caused by these chemical weapons still visible in the maternity wards of Vietnam today. It's true. The United States knocked hell out of Vietnam, but Vietnam prevailed. And the United States Armed Forces, and you cannot conquer a country without boots on the ground, suffered 58,000 dead Yankees in Vietnam, hundreds of thousands of wounded physically and mentally, millions of crimes and suicides committed over the rest of the lives of the people who never recovered from being a U.S. soldier in Vietnam. Prepare yourselves for all of that again. I promise you, Donald, I promise you that. Now, the one good thing you could say about Donald Trump, he's definitely trying to end the war in Ukraine. I know there are people who don't believe him. I know there are people who don't like me believing him, but I happen to believe him. For whatever reason, I have no idea what the genuine reason would be, but I am persuaded that Trump is seeking to bring about the end of the Ukraine war. He'll try and do it as much in his own interest as he possibly can. He'll try and do it to, I don't know, palliate the concerns of some in his own party, Miss Linda Graham, for example. He'll try and find face-saving formulae to wrap up what will be nonetheless seen across the rest of the world as a monumental victory for the people of the Russian Federation, for the people of the former republics of the Donbass, for the armed forces of the Russian Federation, for the workers on the home front of the Russian Federation, and for those people who stood up when things were tough and declared, as I did on Tucker Carlson and do again now, I do not want to go to war with Russia. The Ukraine war is over. Stop game playing, cosplaying. Stop it before our people get even more hurt than they've already been. Stay tuned. It's the mother of all talk shows.
What a great show this is! I listened to it, I thought, wow, what a great show. I've called into your show today, George, because I'm a great caller. Probably the greatest caller you've ever had. I really am. The only way your show could be better is if it had more of me, Donald J. Trump, in it. You keep talking about me, George. You do. I've heard it. I have. So many of the American people, the best people, listen to your show. And I've heard them crying about me. I have. And I listen and I go, ooh, America, don't cry. Don't cry. You need to be careful what you say about me, George. You don't want me to put a tariff on your show like I did with China. And then you'll come running for my help, just like little Zelensky. You know, I know you will. I know these things. Make the mother of all talk shows great again. That's why we're here. That's what we're gonna do, George. We're gonna boost your ratings. Donald is gonna boost them bigly. I'm giving your show the Trump bump. You're welcome, George. Thank me. And remember, nobody talks like me. Nobody calls like me. And absolutely nobody ends a phone call like me. I'm hanging up now. Not because I finished, but because I won.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, I don't know about the Trump bump, but we're definitely getting the Tucker-Carlson bump. Look at this poll. 33,000 people have voted on it already, and I'm only now just announcing it. Should Zelensky be investigated for corruption? Yes or no? You can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream, or if you're one of the vanguard, on my Patreon page, patreon.com/George Galloway. 33,000 people have already voted. If you want to call the show, it's toll-free in the United States and Canada. The number is +1 844 944 3344. It's free in Britain and Ireland, 0808 196 5522. And the international number is 0044 203 966 2625. Hit the phones. Why don't you? Our first guest, Rania Khalek, one of journalist and host of Dispatches on Breakthrough News. She can talk about almost anything. You wait and see. Rania, welcome to the mother of all talk shows. Been some time since we last saw you. I want to talk to you about the Middle East, about Lebanon and so on. But if I may, I saw you commented on the Trump pardon for one of the world's biggest Latin American drug dealers, whilst at the same time saying he's about to invade Venezuela to stop drug dealing. You really couldn't make this up. It is the world's worst pretext for a war, isn't it?
It's truly incredible, George. It's good to see you too, and congrats on that Tucker bump. And yeah, this weekend was wild because we saw Donald Trump do two things. One, he pardoned what is essentially a former narco dictator of Honduras, Juan Orlando Hernandez, who was sentenced in a U.S. court last year for trafficking 400 tons of cocaine. That's a lot of drugs. And he pardoned him because it's a political ally of his. And this is happening as Trump is essentially interfering in Honduras presidential elections today, backing of course the far-right personality who's running against the left. And this comes as Trump is also escalating, as you've been talking about, against Venezuela under the guise of fighting drug trafficking. And his administration has literally made up Venezuelan cartels to go after, to label as terrorist organizations, to try to justify this criminal targeting of people in fishing boats in the Caribbean. They've killed over 80 people so far, and they're threatening to overthrow Maduro based on lies. Literally just obvious lies. And what's amazing, George, is that they're not even bothering to really back up their lies, in the sense that the majority of the U.S. population doesn't even support this, including Trump's own base. They do not support him going into Venezuela. This is actually little Marco Rubio, who's in charge of pushing for this policy, and Stephen Miller. And it's amazing too, George, that it's coming from people who hate migrants so much, yet they're about to embark on a regime change war that, if they do go through with it, will be catastrophic and will cause a lot more migrants to come to the U.S., because you're talking about a country of 30 million people, Venezuela, and overthrowing the government there would completely destabilize it.
It is, you laugh or you cry with these things. It is laughable on one level, but you cry because it does look as if they are going to try and do this. The pretext is not even wafer thin, it's non-existent. But even if it was true, even if there were a lot of illegal drugs coming from Venezuela to the United States, which there is not, the obvious thing to do would be to talk to the Venezuelan government, act with and work with, assist the Venezuelan government in stopping this narco traffic. But of course, the narco is them. The money from the cartels is all in the banks of Florida. You mentioned little Marco Rubio. He lived in a house belonging to one of the big narco traffickers. The idea that Venezuela, this small socialist country and extremely patriotic country, is the source of America's drug problem is so patently absurd as to hardly even be worth discussing. But is anybody buying it in the United States? Is the media buying it, for example?
I would say only the pro-Trump media is just going along with whatever he says. So on Fox News and on Newsmax and all these various right-wing outlets, the Daily Wire, they'll be pushing this whole narco-terrorist label against Maduro. Whereas the entire corporate media, there's actually a split in the ruling class here, because they do recognize that this is based on absurdities. And while they obviously have no love, the corporate media in the U.S. has zero love for the Venezuelan government. They've long supported regime change efforts against Venezuela. They prefer to do it in a way that actually gets the support, I think, of the American public. And this is not it. I mean, at the end of the day, why is the U.S. so antagonistic towards Venezuela? It's exactly what you said. Venezuela is a socialist country that embarked on a revolution, the Bolivarian Revolution under Chavez. They just want to control their own resources and use them to distribute, subsidies to their people. Like you said, it is a very patriotic country. And of course, that's a huge threat to the U.S., which prefers to steal resources from the entire global south. So they've been trying to regime change Venezuela for a long time, but this is the first time you see this sort of drug label attempt to do it. And like you said, it's based on nothing. And, I know we're going to talk about the Middle East, George. I would say you cannot separate what's happening in places like Gaza and Lebanon and Syria from what's happening in Venezuela, because the genocide in Gaza and the ongoing aggression against Syria and Lebanon and the rest of the region by the Israelis and Americans has really raised the threshold of what's allowed when it comes to U.S. imperial aggression and cruelty and how far they're willing to go. I really don't think that you would see this wanton, murderous just targeting of fishermen in the Caribbean the way you have since August, killing over 82 people, had it not been for the horrors that we've seen live streamed for the last 2 years from Gaza and the rest of the region.
Now, the Pope is in Lebanon today. He's the only popular visitor I've seen coming from the West in Lebanon recently. You've had the U.S. envoy who doubles as the ambassador in Turkey, close friend of Jeffrey Epstein, insulting you all. believe this or not, demanding that you behave in a civilized manner. Let's start with Lebanon. The vultures are circling. How are the Lebanese people and government going to handle this very dangerous moment?
Well, dangerous is definitely the right word. Lebanon is in a horrible predicament right now because you have a government that is being pressured and is kind of aligned with the U.S. The U.S., since the ceasefire last year, has been trying to pressure the prime minister and the president of Lebanon to basically use the Lebanese army to disarm Hezbollah. And it's a very sensitive issue because that would actually cause a civil war-like confrontation in the country. And then you're also asking a country to disarm its only defensive force while it's facing a neighbor to the south, the Israelis, who want to steal their land and murder them. Since the ceasefire last year, there have been over 10,000 Israeli ceasefire violations against Lebanon. They've killed over 127 civilians in Lebanon. Since that time, they're occupying 5 areas of South Lebanon right now, and they bomb the country almost every single day at this point. They're not allowing any reconstruction in the south. They're even bombing reconstruction equipment, and they're promising to escalate further because even this U.S. allied administration that's in charge of Lebanon isn't good enough for the Israelis. The Israelis basically want to go in and just bomb and destroy, and they think that they can disarm Hezbollah by doing that further across the country. So right now we're heading, ahead of the holidays. A lot of people visit Lebanon on the holidays, and everyone is really concerned right now that there might be a huge escalation. It's not just might, it's actually when. There's going to be an escalation by the Israelis. And right now you have an administration in the U.S., not that the past administration really had any red lines, but this one is, also giving Israel a blank check to do whatever they want. So Lebanon's in a very tough position, as are its neighbors in the region who have to deal with this horrific settler colonial aggressive neighbor.
As you know, I entered the Arab world for the first time through the portal of Lebanon in 1977. I lived in Beirut at that time. Lebanon has been bleeding, caused by Israel, basically all of my adult life. I mean, I was 23 when I first set foot in Beirut. I'm 71 now. And this has been one long, bloody war. And the Lebanese resistance is literally the only defense that Lebanon has. It's been stabbed in the back many times by various actors in Beirut. What's the state of public opinion about this issue now?
I would say it's as polarized as it's always been. You have Hezbollah's base in the south. The Shia population of Lebanon is largely supportive of this force, that it's the only thing they can turn to defend themselves against a brutal occupier, because the country, the government, is incapable of doing so and refuses to do so. In fact, their government is trying to take away their ability to defend themselves in their villages. And then, the rest of the population of Lebanon, partly supportive of the resistance, partly not. There are those who are obviously, as is the case with a lot of countries in the global south, you have a portion of the country that is allied with the imperialists. And of course, they are working with the U.S. to try to weaken the resistance or ultimately get rid of it. And so that's why you have this very real fear of potential civil chaos if you actually do have the Lebanese army end up confronting Hezbollah to disarm them. They won't be able to disarm them, but it would cause a civil war-like scenario in Lebanon. And so that's another concern people have. So in addition to, Israeli bombs dropping from the sky and potential further Israeli invasion and theft of land, people also have to worry about a civil war on the ground with their own countrymen.
A civil war like the one in Syria, just across the border. All of the time that I described earlier, the fate of Syria and Lebanon has been intertwined. Now, do people not look across the border, see the massacres, the persecution, and see the daily increasing Israeli occupation and land theft going on in Syria, and say, hey, we don't want to go into that good night?
Absolutely. People are horrified by what's taken place in Syria since last year, with Ahmed al-Sharaa taking over as president, formerly known as Mohammed al-Julani, leader of the al-Qaeda branch in Syria, formerly a member of ISIS. Now the president of this country and his forces, his HTS forces, who occupy the intelligence agencies and now, the high-ranking members of his military forces, have been going around the country and slaughtering minorities. And also have been threatening to come into Lebanon and do the same there. So many people in Lebanon are even more frightened with the prospect of disarming Hezbollah at a time, we remember back in the ISIS al-Qaeda days not too long ago, Hezbollah was crucial to preventing their takeover of areas of Lebanon and to preventing massacres of minorities across Lebanon when they had taken over large swaths of Iraq and Syria. And I'm glad you mentioned Syria, because at the same time as you have this new government in Syria that's trying so hard to be best friends with the Israelis, they want so badly to normalize, you also have the Israelis saying, no, thank you. They've bombed Syria since last year over 1,000 times. Over 1,000 times. They're currently occupying something like 9 areas of Syria. The Israelis go in and they disappear Syrians. Just this weekend, I'm sure you saw, George, the Israelis did a raid in the southern part of Syria that's considered the countryside of Damascus, and they killed 13 people. They went into Syria to arrest people, and they killed 13 people, including 2 children. And then there was a firefight. Some Israeli soldiers got injured, and of course they call that terrorism, because any resistance to Israel is considered terrorism. And what has the Syrian government under Ahmed al-Sharaa done? Nothing except for complain a little bit at the UN. That's it. They're not defending their people. They've let the Israelis destroy all of their military infrastructure, and they're just begging and pleading to please normalize with the Israelis. It's such a huge portrayal of not just the Palestinian cause, but the cause of sovereignty across the region.
Speaking of murdered children, Israel murdered another 2 children, at least 2, in Gaza today. The rest of the world thinks there's a ceasefire in Gaza, but there isn't, is there?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely not. In Gaza, there have already been, since the October 10th ceasefire, and I put ceasefire in big quotes, George, since that supposed ceasefire went into place, Israel has violated it over 500 times. And as you said, they've killed over 350 civilians at this point. And as you said, just this weekend, they killed 2 small children. And why did they kill those children? They accused them of crossing into the yellow line. This is a line that Israel has created that occupies about 58% of Gaza. The line moves all the time, so nobody really knows where it is. And it's just to prevent Palestinians from returning into their homes in Gaza that they were displaced from. So Israel can steal more land and concentrate them into smaller and smaller areas of the Strip. This genocide is absolutely ongoing. And, I know people have been hearing this for over 2 years, and it's probably sounding a little bit old, and maybe people are it's become normalized. This genocide in Gaza has become so normalized. It's over 100,000 deaths, right? It's like hard to pay attention or focus on the small details anymore, George. But I just want to say that what's happening in Gaza is important to the entire world, not just because from a moral standpoint that we should oppose genocide, but this war is coming home. And what I mean by that is that support for Israel has plummeted to a historic low in just the US. I mean, I'm sure even in the UK, it's the same. And so the Israelis, they can't really, they basically, for the temporary period, they're in a winning position across the region. They've weakened the resistance. They're kind of in greater Israel times and taking over more land. But now their new war is with public opinion in the West, because they can't function as a settler colony without ongoing unconditional support from the Western countries. And those are, kind of bourgeoisie democracies where you do need some public support to continue giving Israel billions and billions and billions of dollars a year, while the rest of us in these Western countries, can't access healthcare and, are having trouble affording grocery bills. But all that's to say, the Israelis are now turning to the Western countries to work with administrations like Donald Trump to try to take away our democratic rights to protest. And so this is about you and your rights if you're living in the UK or the US or anywhere across the Western world right now, because the Israelis are spending a huge amount of money to collaborate with extremely undemocratic forces in these countries to take away our right to free speech and our right to protest. I mean, look what's happening to Palestine Action in the UK. So all that's to say, what happens in Gaza doesn't stay there. So we need to keep focusing on what's happening in Gaza, keep protesting it, keep opposing it, and pay attention to what the Israelis are doing propagandistically in our own countries, consolidating control over media and really trying to come after our basic rights.
The audience is demanding more of you, but the hour precludes it. How can people follow your work, Rania?
Well, I appreciate that, George, and I appreciate you. People can follow my work by following Breakthrough News, where I host a show, as you said, called Dispatches. We're on all social media platforms. Go subscribe to us on YouTube, on Instagram, on Twitter. We're there covering all these stories as much as possible. Independent media, more important than ever.
You're a star. Rania Khalek, thank you very much indeed for joining us, host of Dispatches on Breakthrough News, a superstar. In fact, let me take a quick break. I'll be right back. Stay tuned. My grandson, Sean, who's answering the phones tonight, had his first 1 million view tweet about Gaza, and I predict great things from him. So we're not going to go away. We believe in the next life. We believe that we will all be judged on what we did in this life, and that will determine our fate. And so we face whatever we have to face, if not with equanimity. Can't say that the experience was one that one can feel sanguine about. It was genuinely horrific, and I'll never forget it. It was the more horrific for being unexpected by me. I never believed that someone like me, of my age and with my background and with my position in British politics, would ever be told that I was being held under the Terrorism Act. I'm not unmoved by it, but I'm certainly undeterred by it.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, this poll is headed for a 40,000 poll, I'm sure. Should Zelensky be investigated for corruption? Do bears defecate in the woods? You can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway. You can vote on X, where Zelensky's remaining 2,500 exactly friends still hang out. You can vote on the YouTube community poll. You can vote on the YouTube stream. And if you're one of the creme de la creme, you can vote on my Patreon page, patreon.com/George Galloway. Paddy is in Donegal and wants to talk about Venezuela. Paddy, welcome. What have you got to say?
Yes, you're a brave man, George. I was in Venezuela almost 6 years ago. I was with a political delegation with a man who from there who was in New York, and we saw so much in the days I was there. And believe me, I had to fly from Iceland to your country to then Spain. I saw more homeless people in 2.5 hours of the nighttime in London than I ever saw in all the time in Caracas. And I was at the plantation and cacao plantation and fishermen where they stopped the coup. And I don't think the U.S. should go into Venezuela, but I can't believe they've amassed all the hardware. The same man you're talking to, 3 weeks in the West Bank, at December to January, and I saw a veteran village that's now been completely erased. And you know what they're called, George? They're called planters. The people from the 6 counties corrected me. I was calling them squatters. Yeah. They use the other S word you heard about, but they're really planters, aren't they? King James Plantation, First Virginia, second 6 counties.
The role is exactly the role of the planters that the British, principally the Scottish, actually, planted in Ireland to dominate the local people, to divide the local people, and to help the empire rule the local people. But tell me this, Paddy, have I exaggerated the sense of patriotism in Venezuela? It's not the kind of place, and they are not the kind of people that are going to allow Donald Trump to rule them, are they?
Loyal, and every Venezuelan I met in Florida, they all hated the government, but everyone I met on the ground, they all were in favor of it. One more point I want to make. When I was in Chicago, I met someone by my high school years after who wrote a book, The Perfect Holocaust. 5.105 million Irish died during the food removal campaign, which is more people that died of a certain religion in Europe. We won't get into that story now, but they say the bank's too big to fail. Is a lie too big to fail? That's my final question, George. Is a lie too big to fail? I found one. Thank you.
Well, Paddy and Donegal, extremely powerful. Is a lie too big to fail? Well, it depends on the lie. Some lies have legs for a very long time, but the truth will always prevail. Of that, I am sure. Now, you can leave comments on if you're watching on YouTube, and if you are, please subscribe to the channel and give a thumbs up to the show. It really helps. Both of those things really helps. You can leave a comment by scanning the QR code now. Jay Weaver says, "What a phenomenal guest. First time I have listened to her. Nothing short of amazing." I felt exactly the same, and I have listened to her a lot. Kinkle Z says, "Firing one weapon at Venezuela is against the U.S. Constitution, and no U.S. military person should do it." And Zaidal Hindawi says, "I doubt Venezuela have nukes, otherwise America would not invade them like they avoid North Korea." Raimundo Gonzalez says, "Venezuelans are very politically literate and they will give a hard time to the U.S. Army." And Yusuf Chaka, "George, maybe you should return the favor and invite Tucker Carlson on the mother of all talk shows." That's not a bad idea. I'm not sure he'll do it, but I'll try. Robert is on the line in the U.S., in Oregon, on the Tucker interview. Go ahead, Robert. What would you like to say?
Well, first of all, George, I'd like to congratulate you and applaud you for doing that interview. It proved what you've been saying for years and years, that the tectonic plates have shifted, that the old paradigms of left and right have dissolved altogether.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that, Robert, that what counts is right and wrong. What counts is truth and falsehood. What counts is good and evil. That's the real dichotomy. And as I said on the show, in this era of political cross-dressing, where the people demanding more and more war are the people in rainbow-coloured liberal clothes, and it's the Colonel McGregors and the Lieutenant Colonel Dan Davises and the former Marine Intelligence Officer Scott Ritter and Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and others like them. They are the people who are saying stop the wars, while the liberals are the people saying no, start the wars, get the wars going and keep them going. Last word to you, Robert.
It shows that we live in multiple worlds. We don't only live in a material world, but we live in a world of ideas. And left and right is not a property of the world of ideas. Ideas can't be labeled that way. They have their own lives, and we interact with them. But a good idea is a good idea, and a bad idea is a bad idea.
Well said, a wise man in Oregon. Now, have you become a MOATS donor yet? You can get your name up in lights by making a donation via the MOATS.tv website, just like these donors this week did. Anita Louise C6, Neville Hamilton, Shireen Creshan, Roger Boniface, and Elaine Ryan. A big thanks to every one of you and every one of you who are not yet up in lights but who have been donating also. Just scan the QR code now and click on the Donate Now button anywhere on the site. Let's stay in America. California. David wants to talk about Venezuela. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, how you doing, George? Oh,
By the grace of God, good, thanks.
Okay, I'm going to get to the point right quick. Now, in Venezuela, who knows what the Russians got there? Who knows what the Chinese brought in there? Plus, they share a great big border with Brazil, and in between there's a bunch of forest and jungle. You can sneak all kinds of stuff across that border. So we don't know what's in there. And nobody tells us what's in there because I believe they don't know themselves. I believe Washington don't know really what's in there. And they're just puffing their chest out. They got a air blockade going. They got a sea blockade going. And I'm looking at Russia sitting back saying, you know what? It'd be a real nice payback if we give them a little something to embarrass them with.
Yeah, the Americans supported the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan because they wanted a Soviet Vietnam. Well, Venezuela is definitely going to be an American Vietnam 2.0. David in California, thanks very much indeed. Now, the podcast's going great. It's the #1 political podcast in Qatar. #1 in Qatar. And also on the cusp of being in the charts for politics in the United States. How about that then? We are right on the edge of being in the charts in the United States. Do you know how many podcasts there are in the United States? Well, we are just outside the top 100. If you are in the United States, please get us into the charts for next week. We're in the top 10 in Chile, Pakistan, where there's still no sign of Imran Khan, by the way, and in the top 10 in South Africa. So join the club. Download the MOATS podcast by scanning the QR code on your screen now. Now, the poll, should Zelensky be investigated for corruption? It's headed fast for a 40,000 poll, and here are the results. It's quite amusing, actually. On Telegram, should Zelensky be investigated for corruption? On Telegram, yes, say 99%. On the YouTube community poll, yes, say 94%. On the YouTube stream, yes, say 96%. And on Patreon, 99% say yes. Guess what the outlier is? X, where only 48% of the voters say yes. So why don't you go on to X now and vote on that poll? Because that's what the friends of Zelensky have plainly been doing. So Zelensky gets 1,641% on all the other platforms and 52% on X. So Jack is up early. He's down under in Sydney. And he wants to talk about Pope Leo and Zionism. I told you it's the global university of the airwaves. Jack in Sydney, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, George, and thanks for having me on your show. And again, thanks so much for everything you've done over the years. A good truth, sir. I'm part of an Irish community radio group in Sydney. We've been on air as volunteers for 33 years, so we keep a very close eye on the multicultural station that we broadcast on obviously Irish affairs, but global affairs. And we wanted to throw out some ideas to provoke a bit of thought with you and your worldwide audience, as Simon in Florida always articulates on your show. We understand the Pope Leo is currently traveling outside Rome, and we'd like to propose that this Illinois-born Blues Brothers fan go to the Holy Land on a mission from God, as it were. The mission is to re-establish the Catholic Church's authority there by moving several of its clergies currently in Rome to run the church from the Holy Land. I mean, it's in one sense it's kind of looking at something that people should be asking, why not? I mean, after all, Jesus is from the Holy Land and did not, to our knowledge, live at any time in Rome. Perhaps call it a Catholic alia, George. What are your thoughts on that? And then we'll get around to the faux outrage from Zionists about a park in Dublin.
Well, it's the best idea that has ever been proposed here on the Mother of All Talk Shows. Jesus of Nazareth, who was born in Bethlehem and executed in Jerusalem, is where the church should be headquartered. Peter was only in Rome because of the persecution and massacre that accompanied the execution and resurrection of Jesus. So the idea is a spiffing idea. And as it happens, the Pope is very nearby. He's currently in Lebanon. He could easily detour. The flight would not take 1 hour, would take 30 minutes for him now to redirect this papal visit, not just to Lebanon, where it's being warmly welcomed and where it's vitally necessary, but if he turned up, as Pope Francis, God rest his soul, used to do on a nightly basis on the telephone, Pope Francis was present in the Holy Land every night, every single night, even from his deathbed. I think Pope Leo could do the church and do humanity a service by listening to your idea. A quick one then, Jack, and then I'll let you go.
Sure. The other, it's the usual faux outrage from Zionists about the renaming of a park in Dublin, in affluent Dublin, a place called Ranelagh. The park is currently called Herzog Park. And what's important about this was only named in 1995 after the former first president of the State of Israel, Chaim Herzog. He wasn't born in Dublin. And in our view, it would be far more appropriate a park or a street be named in his name in his birth city of Belfast. Meanwhile, we suggest well-known and respected sons and daughters of Ranelagh, perhaps Maureen O'Hara being one, or George, better still, how about James Joyce Park, replacing the name of Herzog Park? Got a meal of
Well, both of those are good. I'd plump for Maureen O'Hara myself. She's exactly the kind of flame-haired spirit that we love from Irish women. How intriguing. Two brilliant suggestions in the early hours of the morning down under in Sydney. Jack, many thanks. Dana is in Michigan on Venezuela. On you go, Dana.
Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
By the grace of God, I hear you well. Go ahead.
Oh, yes, sir. I just want to make clear it is 3:00 p.m. here in the United States. And I agree with you 100% on the Venezuela. Not something that us U.S. citizens are looking forward to, and we think it is wrong and corrupt. And we understand that it is not about drugs. It is all about oil and power.
It is. I mean, it's so obvious. Only a fool could believe Donald Trump's pretext, right? I mean, who believes he's invading Venezuela to stop the drug traffic when 95% of the drug traffic comes through other countries, all of the proceeds are banked in the United States, and where he's just pardoned a guy who was sent down in an American court for corruptly importing 400 tons of cocaine. I mean, even Hunter Biden couldn't get through a mere fraction of that. It's absurd and ridiculous. There's never been a more absurd pretext for a war than Donald Trump's pretext for a war with Venezuela. But I promise you he'll have a long time to regret it. Well, look, let me take a quick break because we have got maybe the world's finest military analyst and author, Andrei Martyanov, by popular demand, coming up right after this break. Stay tuned.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special announcement. A big thank you to all our wonderful listeners, as the Mother of All Talk Shows podcast is now one of the most listened to political podcasts in the entire world. We are the #1 English-speaking political podcast in the Middle East, and in the last year alone have charted in the top 10 in podcast land in Pakistan, Russia, and China. Like, rate, and subscribe to the MOATS podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts to be a part of the fastest rising independent news show in the world.
You are listening to the Mother of All Talk Shows with George Galloway.
Okay, you've got 40 minutes to vote on the poll. You can vote on Telegram, my Telegram, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream, and, of course, on my Patreon, if you are one of the vanguard that follows me there, patreon.com/George Galloway. It is overwhelmingly the view of almost 40,000 people that Zelensky should be investigated for corruption. And many of those who did not vote yes don't want him put on trial, if you get my drift. They want more summary justice. Andrei Martyanov is a military analyst and author of the highest ribbon. And I'm glad to say he joins us now to test my thesis, Andrei, that is the 11th hour in the conflict in Ukraine, the NATO-Russia war in Ukraine. Do you share that view?
Hi, George. Yeah, I do. The fact that NATO essentially was defeated already in 2023 was obvious to any real military professional after the famed counter-offensive failed miserably, and it was the most embarrassing military offensive probably in history. They didn't even reach the first line of defense. It was already clear then that it was a done deal, just was the amount of the convulsions which the NATO force, because Ukraine is the best proxy after Hitler that unified Europe had in the last 100 years, if you wish. So, and yes, I agree with you, it's 11th hour.
The question then is it going to end through military collapse on the part of Ukraine or by negotiation with Donald Trump? How closely have you followed the very brief talks that took place in Florida today, involving Witkoff just before he flies to Moscow, involving Rubio, and involving an entirely new Ukrainian delegation, because, of course, the last one is in jail or running away from jail. Do you see any significance in how brief it was?
Not really. I mean, it is clear that it's mostly what is happening. It's beyond Russia's real interest. It's allowed to basically continue this brown noise and PR action about pretending that somehow United States and Trump administration has any bearing on the outcome. It doesn't. It doesn't matter what kind of the negotiations they want to pretend to have with Russians. And Russians are extremely good in terms, through especially foreign ministry, diplomatically, to pull the tomcat by the gonads, as long as it takes. And as the result, I think that, as Vladimir Putin stated, I mean, who am I to contradict him, that we can do it either way, peacefully or militarily. But the negotiations will stop once Ukraine basically leaves the occupied territories. And we know what kind of territories those are. Those 4 new Russian oblast regions, which have been, this is a constitutional issue for Russia. And of course, then we'll have to wait and see what kind of the buffer zone will be arranged. And it is being arranged as we speak. So there is no need for Russia to stop military activity. And Russia can do it as long as it takes. And in this case, there are some indications of the collapse on the front. Obviously, even the incompetent Trump administration is being sometimes informed by such people, even Driscoll. Mr. Driscoll, together with the chief of the U.S. Army Staff, Lieutenant General, I believe, George, that's his name, they already came out 2 days ago. They went on record saying that, Ukraine loses one way or another. It doesn't matter what it does. And so, that's, in this case, that's pretty much what it frames there.
Andrei, the territorial issues, of course, are one very big issue. And they appear, according to briefings from the U.S., to have been resolved, or at least to the satisfaction of the U.S., very briefly in Florida today. But that tends to suggest that the territorial sacrifice that Ukraine is ready to make is of limited. And if I put this to you, the terrorist attack on 2 Chinese tankers by drones this very week would not have been possible if Ukraine didn't have access to the sea. And that raises for me the question of, if they can do that at will and cause such devastation, environmental, economic, and international. This was Kazakh oil. These were Chinese tankers. And the Ukrainian armed forces sunk them, fired missiles at them, and set them on fire. Are we sure that Russia will accept a territorial gain only of the 4 republics that are now in Novorossiya?
It's a difficult question, really. I am obviously not privy to discussions in the Russia Security Council, which really matters here. And I wish I was the fly on the wall there for 30 minutes at least. But listen, it's all about how the political process begins to roll down the, so to speak, the slope. It is clear that at some point of time, that obviously Russia can take Odessa. It goes without saying if it comes down to it. But Russians are not going to be dealing just with the territorial issues. Many people do not understand the severe reality of that, which is beyond even the, returning Odessa to where it rightfully belonged since the times of Catherine the Great, which is Russia. But the point is, it's war not between Russia and Ukraine. Ukraine is a virtual state supported financially and militarily by the what it amounts to NATO, combined West. And the task for Russia today, despite the fact that we obviously have this all discussions, PR statements and things of this nature, is obviously the complete demilitarization of the NATO. And if we go back to the December of the 2021 and this famous peremptory, as they described it, the statement by Russian Foreign Ministry, which they called ultimatum. Okay, we may agree that it probably was ultimatum. One of the key points there was the NATO rolling back to the borders of 1997. And this demand, essentially, it never actually have been removed from those things. Of course, their conditions have been modified somewhat, but in the end, it is about demilitarizing Europe and basically European part of NATO. So we have to keep this in mind. Odessa, in this case, while becoming very important, for example, in access of the of Ukraine, or rather people who control it now, it is controlled from London and from Paris. They still they have this urge to place whatever the troops they can muster into Odessa. They're going to be killed, of course. But the point is that it's not the most important point, because obviously, against the background of what is happening on the front, yeah, it's a very unfortunate situation. It is very bad in many respects. But many people do not remember, for example, about a year ago, a very large Russian bulker, which was transporting, by the way, the lead for one of the reactors at the Akuyu, which is being erected by Russians in Turkey, Akuyu nuclear power plant, Ursa Major, was sunk. And everybody knows how it was sunk, when suddenly it's the only one which, and I understand, United Kingdom can deploy to the sea, astute nuclear powered submarines surfaced after the Russian salvage ship and arrived there to check what happened, how this Ursa Major vessel was sunk. So piracy and sabotage and terrorism on the shipping lanes of communications will continue. It doesn't matter if Russians take Odessa or not. It's just that because everybody understands also that those are non-uncrewed cutters, basically. That's what they are. They're drones, surface drones. They are supplied by Great Britain. It's a well-known fact. And there were a number of strikes on those assembly areas, and they will continue. But it is what it is. That's war. You win some, you lose some, but the reality is the terrorism and sabotage on the shipping lanes of communications will continue, and not in the Black Sea only. In the end, we have to remember that both Bulgaria and Romania are NATO members. And those things can be launched from there for all intents and purposes. So, and that will not change in any way basically the significance of taking Odessa or not. It just will be the part of Russian city eventually, but NATO will be able, or whoever basically drives the NATO policies, will be able to continue those sabotage and anti-shipping, commercial shipping operations from Constanza for all intents and purposes, or whatever the other, port in Bulgaria or something else in Romania. So that's what it is. It just cannot be changed in this way, by merely taking.
Of course, you're right. You're right, Professor, on all of that, for sure. So let's switch to the non-territorial issues. The first among those, you already identified that this war cannot end with Ukraine joining NATO, or for that matter, NATO being in Ukraine at all. That's axiomatic, surely. Russia didn't make all this effort, this sacrifice to allow a rump Ukraine to join NATO. But what about the peculiarly British and French obsession with non-NATO European forces coming into Ukraine as some kind of reassurance force? Heaven knows, neither politically nor economically can Britain or France afford this, but they are, it seems, obsessed with doing it. What would be the likely Russian reaction to that?
These forces will be killed. They will be annihilated. That's simple as that. They will be hunted down and killed. So it doesn't matter in what manner. It could be standoff weaponry. And Russians have actually second best ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance apparatus. The second best because obviously the United States has a much bigger satellite constellation which it employs, but Russia has second one. And so apart from the fact that Russians do enjoy a significant human intel advantage there, because obviously there are a number of Ukrainians or Russian people who live in Ukraine who are, ready to support the Russian effort against the Nazi regime in Kiev. And so it doesn't matter, apart from the fact, and I want to quote, not me, forget about me, but what about Colonel Douglas MacGregor? I think you know him. And when he stated that United Kingdom, British Army is a Lilliputian force. And the same goes for French. Remove French nuclear deterrent, their ground forces are pathetic. It's just a joke. Except for the Foreign Legion, they cannot provide anything but a few thousand here and there of people who will be scared, basically, for their existence, pretty much, because they will be hunted down and killed. And as a result, this has nothing to do with any rational policies. This has nothing to do with any geopolitical interest, because neither, Europe as a whole is not a subject of the international relations anymore. It's an object, and let alone such insignificant militarily and economically countries as France or Great Britain. But this is all about, it's not even Russophobia, it's a visceral hatred of Russians as a general. There are a number of reasons for that. If you look attentively at the history, which prior to the Crimean War, and you remember the main guys who were driving this war were, of course, British and French. During the Crystal Palace heyday, which was Halcyon Days, which was erected for the World Exhibition, there was already there at that time, which was prior to the Crimean War, a huge anti-Russian sentiment in British society, which was driven by very much business circles, and especially British businessmen who were very, very upset by the fact that Russian businessmen and Russian trade was beginning to penetrate the traditional, British markets, so to speak, colonial markets, granted that. And so, and as a result, the fact that Russians just basically eliminated Turkish fleet at Sinop in 1853. It was just basically a pretext. It was just, they said it casus belli, let's go in and do whatever they did, to Sevastopol after the 349 days of siege. And Leo Tolstoy, of course, was there, and we know the story after that. But that was the main reason. It wasn't really just economic rationale. There was always this, especially on the higher class of British society, aristocracy, and they just don't like Russians. They hate them, in fact. A beautiful story from 1941-42, when the trade union of the British engineers and British machinists were actually accused, Colonel Brabazon, who at that time was the guy who was in charge of providing some aid, limited as it was, but it was heroic effort on part of English people, British people, to support Soviet Union in the World War II. That they accused him of sabotaging essentially the supply of the, British aircraft, and Brabazon was in charge of this. Well, he had also the plane named after him after World War II. And so that was the difference, between the regular English people and obviously aristocratic. Brabazon was an aristocrat, and from the higher society. They just don't like Russians. You've been a member of parliament, George. I'm pretty sure you know the mood there, so the higher upper echelons of British power.
It's an issue I'm particularly exercised about. But I make the point that you yourself did, by inference, that when Yuri Gagarin came to the industrial heartland of England, he was lionized by the mass of the people, the working people.
Absolutely.
In Fife, in Scotland, there is still a road called Yuri Gagarin Way. and no one has dared to touch it. When the famous Moscow Dynamo came and toured Britain with Lev Yashin in the goal, they were loved. They were loved by the people. So there is a struggle in Britain between those elements of the ruling elite who hate Russia and Russians, and hated them long before Putin, long before the Bolsheviks. They hated them, as you just pointed out, in the 19th century. I'd love to talk with you at length more about that, but alas, the hour is against us. Just one last issue I'd like to raise with you. We've talked about the territorial, we've talked about the post-war military situation and relationships and alliances that would be acceptable. The third one is the economic, isn't it? The West has stolen hundreds of billions of Russia's sovereign wealth. It was a very foolish move to trust these people with your sovereign wealth, by the way, and I hope that's not a mistake that will ever be made again. But
no,
this theft can't be post facto washed, can it? We can't surely expect Russia to agree to the use of their sovereign wealth to rebuild Ukraine, for example, or rearm Ukraine. Russia's demand surely will be for its own money back.
Absolutely. And here's the interesting thing. There is now the school of thought which formed in Russia, and I would say I lean towards it, that actually there are no any more sovereign funds. They have been stolen. And that partially explains the hysterical, desperate, situation in the Europe, especially, which first it took part in the laundering money through the Zelensky regime. For example, DNC, Democratic National Committee in the United States, Biden administration, those criminals like Sullivan, Blinken, and Biden family itself, they benefited greatly from those funds which United States provided to Ukraine, allegedly fight Russians, whatever the Russians wanted to do. I don't know, conquer the world. But the point is that we don't even know if they are there anymore. Because, as already stated, there is a very strong indication that part of this hysteria and part of this, basically rabid Russophobia on part of the European elites is conditioned by the fact that money are not there. They have been stolen. They have been used for any other purpose, for all kinds of purposes. And now there is a huge possibility that once this fact is uncovered and exposed, that will be the end of Europe. Well, it already happened. The end of Europe is fait accompli, but it's going to be their complete moral, degradation. And after that, Europe is done essentially as even their power which can provide some financial services. This is not to say that everything will collapse, in one day, but it is a serious geopolitical issue. It's not just merely issue of economic issue. And again, economics and geopolitics are, interconnected tightly. And so, what can I say? Obviously, Russia is not going to agree to anything. And again, it doesn't matter what they propose, 28 points, 21, 19, then it's going to be 42, and then maybe 168. Nobody knows how many points they will offer. But again, I quote highest Russian political echelon, the Russian, basically Putin and Lavrov and people of this stature, when they say that, well, yeah, this is not a plan. These are just points which could serve as the foundation for further discussions. There is no peace plan. There never was any. And obviously, all those points, they will be discussed. And as we all know, the devil is always in the details. And yes, it is absolutely out of the question that Russians will agree on something when they can basically defeated combined West, which did happen. And so actually, these are conquered who have to submit to the conditions. And the question now is what we observe, obviously, in our world saturated with mass media, that there is a huge spin in the West. Russians, meanwhile, are pretty nonchalant about it because they know what they can do militarily. And the only thing which matters in the end is what happens in the front lines, not what they say in all those, exquisite or, exceptional saloons or whatever clubs in the combined West. It's absolutely meaningless shaking of the air. They just produce some decibels, and that's about it. It has no bearing on the outcome and how it will be shaped politically and judicially.
Man, they were right. What they said about you. You are a master. We have to talk again. Let's get together as soon as possible, Andrei, to discuss what happens in Moscow next week. Andrei Martyanov, military analyst and author. My goodness, what an interview. Short break, and then I'll be right back with your calls right up until Gayatri's social media news roundup. Stay tuned. Big thanks to this week's top donors who visited the new MOATS.tv website. Thank you very much, all of you. And I'm really going to make this point as firmly as I can. Every one of you has to go to MOATS.tv and donate something, even if it is £1, even if it is $1, €1. Nothing comes for free. 2 shows a week cannot be produced for free. We need every person watching to donate at least £1, $1, €1. I can't put it more clearly than that.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Final 10 minutes of the poll, well, 14 minutes of the poll. Should Zelensky be investigated for corruption? Well, everywhere now, including, everywhere now except X thinks by a landslide that Zelensky should be investigated for corruption. Now, 6,868 people have voted on X. 46% say yes, and 54% say no. So, effectively, the NATO forces on which your millions have been spent on these bots and bogus think tanks, I said, all these little, I don't know what you would call them, silos of pro-Ukrainian social media presence. Millions of your money has been spent on them. They're now down to 3,000, maybe 3,500 people. But they are so stupid, they think that the Twitter poll is the whole poll, not realizing that, for example, on the YouTube community poll, 23,000 people have voted by 94% to 6 to prosecute Zelensky. Manny is in London, in Acton, on Palestine. Manny, welcome.
Hello, Mr. Galloway. Good evening. I'll be feeling better.
I'm fine as long as I take my 10 tablets a day, Manny. I'm fine.
Tell me about it.
Not joking.
You got to
10
excuse me
tablets.
if I stutter. I have, but believe me, I have epilepsy. So yeah, I can sort of understand.
Okay.
Mr. Galloway, what I'd like to ask you is, how do you feel about the children, the people of Palestine after the aftermath of all of this? who will help them to deal with the trauma of all of this carnage? Sorry, I'm going to be succinct and just, ask the questions.
Mm-hmm.
That, and do you think the Israeli government will be, do you have hope that they'll be tried in The Hague? And where is Zelensky's money going to?
Well, let me be just as succinct as you were, Manny. The Israeli leaders will never be prosecuted at The Hague until the Western governments that prop up Zionism, Israeli occupation, who tolerate the existence in their political system of parasite colonies of pro-Israel activism. The Hague is for black people from Africa and the occasional Serbian, but nobody else. None of the enemies of the empire will be safe, and none of the friends of the empire will be in any danger at all. Zelensky's money, people have tracked it. I mean, even before the war, the Pandora Papers revealed enormous corruption involving Zelensky and his gang, some of whom have already run away now to Israel. Where else would they go? But since the war, I mean, if Ukraine was one of the most corrupt countries in the world before the West poured hundreds of billions of dollars, euros and pounds into it, how corrupt do you imagine it now is? Well, we're beginning to get at least to the tip of the iceberg of that corruption, and heads will definitely roll. The question is, will the most corrupt head of the corruption, will his head roll? No one will look after the Palestinian children except us, the people. Our governments will not do so. And as soon as it is possible to do so, every one of us is going to have a financial demand on us to try and ease the suffering of these little children. That is, after all, what godliness primarily is, isn't it? Suffer little children, bring unto me the little children. And it's not just their physical wounds. I just looked at some kids without feet. Their feet and lower legs were chopped off by Israeli bombs, the bombs that murdered their mother and father. And these three little children are sitting on a sofa with no feet and no legs and no wheelchair and no physiotherapy and no medical system to look after them. And that's just the physical. What about, as you say, the trauma? The trauma of having lived for 2 years, maybe your first 2 years, or your second 2 years, or your third 2 years of your life. Imagine being a 4-year-old child that since the age of 2 has been living amongst this horror. Imagine being a 10-year-old child and having lived through this horror all of this time. What damage has that done to these poor children? It is unimaginable at this point, incalculable, but one thing can be calculated with great accuracy. Our governments will do jack shit about it. Now, comments. Oxkelox, Oxkelox. Wow, mate. Sends $144 and says, good game, Gigi, the finest broadcaster the UK will ever know. I am so grateful to you for that handsome donation. Thank you very much, and for your kind compliment. Gokanake says, the Pentagon's Pope in Beirut to stop the genocide. We have not heard a single word out of his lips regarding Gaza, unlike his predecessor. He is a Zio asset in the Holy See. And Crowhawk says, the Pope's already been photographed kissing that wall. So the chances of the church standing against Jewish supremacy are literally zero. And Zaidal Hindawi says the liberals sure love liberating people of their lives. And Moss Pachuli says Israeli IDF has trained ICE and also working with ICE in the USA. Trump has handed over the keys to Israel to run America. Now it's my good friend, the one and only Uncle Hoz. Chairman Hoz he is to me. He's too young to be my uncle. Hoz in London on your party. Go ahead, Hoz.
Two things. First of all, George, I wanted to say that I am so sorry to hear about your heart condition and your problems brought on by this police thing, and that person didn't realise that you've not been taking tablets for your heart condition, and so to hear that upsets me because you know how much I love you to bits. So I will just say that I am sorry that's happened to you. About your party, I have long held the attitude of I would like to see a viable left-leaning socialist party come together and get under a banner of we're not Reform, we're not Labour, we're not the Conservatives, we're not the Liberal Democrats, we're not part of this apparatus of state that exists. We'd like to be the left. And I feel like the left actually, with everything that I've seen, it's like it's a classic deep state operation. Could not have gone any better than to find the disunity that we've got on the left. I bleed for the left. I want the left to succeed. But all I've seen is people just stab each other in the face, in the back, in every direction. They don't care about our country. And we're never going to get anything of the left because our country, unfortunately, the left of it are just, I can't say it. You know what I want to say, but I can't say it. I don't want to swear. But it breaks my heart that we are going to be in one cycle of a uniparty until forever. Because if Jeremy's not allowed to win, Zara's not allowed to win, and all they do is just seem to want to stab each other in the face. They can't, put your stuff away, guys. The only person out of all of your party people's speeches that I listened to, and I couldn't listen to much more than I did, was Shokat Patel. He was, for me, the best speaker out of every single person this weekend. I only watched about 4 or 5 or 6 people. He was magnificent. And maybe we need to walk away from toxicity of the people who are running and maybe look to someone like Shokat, who basically is behaving in a way like he's above the arguments and the fighting and the infighting that's taking place. It breaks my heart, George, and what I wanted in an ideal world was to have you, the Greens, all the left-leaning parties to turn around, just like they did in France, get under a left-leaning banner and turn around and say, you know what, we're here to fight for Britain, we're here to fight for the little people, we're here to fight for the working class against all of these people who we know have sold our nation to the highest bidder. Sorry, George.
Well, look, Hoz, a powerful contribution as always. All is not lost. It's never over until it's over. And you haven't been defeated until you have surrendered. And we ain't surrendering. The Workers' Party, of which you're a senior figure, will continue. And we'll be fighting in hundreds of local council seats up and down the country just next May, which is only around the corner. And we'll continue to put our common sense socialism, our old-fashioned, some call it, common sense socialism, on offer to the people, and we'll do our best to try and persuade them to support it. I agree with you about the Leicester MP. He was by far and away the redeeming speech of the conference, but half the people there think he's a transphobe. Half the people there think he's a misogynist. Half the people there probably imagine he's a landlord. All these tropes against Muslims are not going to go away just because Shaukat made a great speech. So the sickness is in the left. You mentioned France. La France Insoumise is exactly what we need in Britain. It's not a party, it's an alliance. And you, Party A, can think what you like about all the issues other than the 4 or 5 issues that we have all agreed to collaborate on and to form an electoral agreement on. And they're obvious. The stop the wars that we are involved in. Stop making the working people pay for the failures of British capitalism. That's an obvious demand that we can all agree to. Save the National Health Service. Nationalize the utilities that were stolen from us and which are now making an absolute bonanza fortune out of the hardship of the people. We used to own the electric. We owned the gas. We owned the water. And now private companies, sometimes foreign countries, state enterprises, own our utilities that once we owned ourselves. And then they were privatized, and now they are quadrupling, quintupling their profits. We can all agree on a limited number of things like that, can't we? Why is that possible in France under Mélenchon, but not possible in Britain under Corbyn? Well, it won't now be Corbyn because he lost. 4,000 people ended Jeremy Corbyn's career today. 4,000. Turns out your party didn't have 50,000 votes. It had 21,035. And only 9,000 people voted to end Jeremy Corbyn's political career, and he only lost by 2%. So half of 9,000, just over 4,500 people provided the political execution of Jeremy Corbyn today. And some fools call it democracy. Some fools call it member-led party. Some fools call it whatever ultra-left nonsense they want to call it. But the end result is they killed the thing that Jeremy worked so hard to create. They killed it. It's no longer Jeremy Corbyn's party. It's people you've never heard of's party. A collective leadership's party. And they will not agree an electoral agreement based on a small number of specific demands. They've told you their demands. Trans-liberation. I never heard the word trans as much, ever, as I heard it over the last 2 days. Joseph with his hat of many colours. What's his first words? My pronouns are she and they. Who cares, mate? Keep it under your hat. We don't give a toss whether you've got a dick or no dick. Where you put your dick, we don't give a damn. It has nothing to do with the gigantic issues that threaten the very lives of our people and which we need, desperately need, to find a common front. And Joseph can go and toss himself off in the corner as far as I'm concerned. Let's go to Gino in the Bronx. He's always worth hearing. Gino, what have you got for us?
George, still letting the freedom ring the way you are. It's so beautiful. Mr. Galloway, first of all, I thank God you are still with us. You're in my prayers. You will be to the rest of my life. You are, and Tucker is also. So when I saw you on the interview this morning with Tucker, oh, my heart just opened up. I said, thank God these two are talking to each other. They have so much in common. The issues involving the democracies, the vulnerability, the mainstream so-called liars trying to keep us from the truth that you guys are telling us. It really, and then at the end, for him to offer you and your family to come to his home. Oh, I never heard him say that before.
Well,
now,
nor me. And I was very touched by it. The only question is, what will Donald Trump say at the airport when I arrive? But I'm hoping very much to take him up on that offer. It was a wonderful occasion. I loved it. I love Tucker Carlson's style. Of course, I have disagreements with him on many things, but he's a good man, a good and true man. Of that, I'm certain. Tell me this, Gino. Are you going to be at war in Venezuela in the next hours?
Well, I pray not. I just to end off with Tucker, I got to say I didn't know him until I knew that he was going to interview Bobby Kennedy here in the land of the free and the home of the brave. He was the first one to put him on 16 years discussing the lies of Fauci. That's when I discovered him. Then I discovered he was against the Ukraine war. He was against what's going on with the Zionists in Israel. So, of course, and Big Pharma influencing the TV, what's being said. So they showed him the door. And thank God he got tenfold increase and more than that in his being individual on his podcast. Now, as far as Venezuela, I would recommend the man who wrote the book Confessions of an Economic Hitman, Anthony Perkins, and he showed his job was to go to South America for years to bribe the government officials to make a deal with the big business people, and if they don't, the jackals are going to come in and kill them. So that book is very relevant at this hour. If you could get him on, I'd also recommend the one who showed Ronald Reagan the dangers of the nuclear possibilities if it went off, which was even worse now. But Helen Caldicott from down under, the land of John Pilger, if she's still alive, she'd be a great guest to really point out those issues very, very, in detailed ways. And the other thing is, Norman Finkelstein, I don't know, have you ever had Norman Finkelstein on your show, the man who studied the Gaza issue for 40 years,
yes.
His Holocaust?
Oh, yes, he's a good friend of mine. Gino, you're a beautiful caller. I love always to hear from you from the Bronx, and you made some great suggestions there. The Economic Hitman is my wife's favorite book. To my chagrin, for the nearly 15 years we've been together, she's insisted on taking it with her, and she reads it and rereads it and rereads it and rereads it. Not just because the first economic hitman operation was against her country of Indonesia, but then became the pattern for such economic, followed, if necessary, by military hitmen across the global south. I'll check out Helen Caldicott. I don't know if she's still alive, and I don't know if the author of Economic Hitman still does interviews. But I'm going to check both those things, and if I can, we're going to put them on. Gino, thanks for a beautiful call. So there's lots of comments on the proposed renaming of Herzog Park in Dublin. This was raised by a friend of the show in Sydney, who has a Catholic radio show, partly Irish, but also other issues. And he raised the fact that there's now a controversy in Ireland over the renaming of Herzog Park. Moose SF says, I vote James Joyce Park. And Michael McIntyre, 4077, sends £5 and says, how about the Rory Gallagher Park? Toon toon. And Ambore 2 says James Connolly Park. Well, you'll always get me agreeing to that one. Starman says Bobby Sands Park or Garth Pierce Park. Saraf says James Joyce Park is certainly way better than Herzog Park. Anything's better than Herzog Park. Mark is in North Carolina on Venezuela. Let's hear from him. Mark, go ahead.
Hey, George. Long time since I called. Look, I believe this is very simple. This is Trump trying to take people's attention away from Epstein. This is also so related, and one of the reasons he wants to take it away from Epstein is the connections with the Mossad. This also goes back to the shooting of those National Guardsmen. It's so obvious to me that was a false flag. This guy worked for the CIA. He was a heavily trained Afghan special forces being used by the CIA. And when it comes to Epstein, I don't know if you remember, years ago I used to have a YouTube channel. They deleted me. They completely kicked me off because they didn't like what I was saying. And one of the things I said was, at the time, I just retired from being a correctional officer in Texas. And I said what happened with a so-called suicide was impossible. It was virtually impossible I worked ad seg, and I worked, I worked suicide watches, and I knew right away this couldn't have happened. This was a murder. They murdered the man because they knew he had a lot to say. And one of the things, too, is not just what was done to those poor little girls, but also the connection with one of the most evil organizations in the world, Mossad. And that, to me, is what right now is Trump is trying to take people's attention away. Because Trump is dirty. Let's be honest about it. I think he made it.
I mean, of course, look over there is a traditional response for people in trouble. There's no doubt there's much merit in what you're saying, but it will quickly become a forest fire. It will, if he attacks Venezuela, it will burn very brightly and for a very long time, and a lot of people and a lot of things will get burned, not only in Venezuela. So it's a particularly anarchistic, nihilistic thing to divert attention from a sex and espionage scandal by setting alight a fire that will consume much of Latin America and will reach the shores of North America also. Mark, great call. There's a legend on the line. It's Erobos in New York on Tucker Carlson. Erobos, welcome back, my friend.
Salubrious salutations, and I hope we're able to maintain our connection. Hello?
Oh, my goodness.
Oh,
yeah, you're on the air.
Again.
I was worried that you disappeared again.
Yes, I'm having an issue with the Wi-Fi. I'm not in control of it. I don't have funds or income to control it. I don't have my own hotspot. So I'm basically at the mercy of the arbitrary capriciousness of the guy that controls the Wi-Fi. And you know me, I'm not going to beg anybody for anything. I'm not the bend the knee, throw myself.
No, you don't need to beg.
I've
already just sent a message to make sure my people pay your bill so that you can control your own Wi-Fi space. You're far too important a caller for us to be at the mercy of the vicissitudes of unreliable internet. So I've already just sent that message. So go on, Erobos, while we've still got you.
Yes, I want to say, first of all, the magnificent guests. Thank you to the MOATS staff. They've never given up on me, even though the connections were failing. You know, albeit Chai the Magnificent, first of her name, and the other staff there, they've always called back, even though they couldn't get through. So shout out to them. And mercy and power to Clan Galloway. Before I get to the Tucker thing, I just wanted to mention the two guests, Rania and Andrei, you know, magnificent. Anna said something that reminded me that the the reason why Julani, Al-Shaddai as he's called, Shaddai, whatever will be, playing basketball with these generals. They're the same, right? They're the same. He's the attack dog, just like they had the attack dogs to break up Libya, break up Yugoslavia. They all have the fundamental thing of being colonizers. So though they may disagree ideologically, religious ideology, philosophical ideology, as you had described, as long as they can have their fiefdom to murder, rape, and torture, modern-day barbarism, as long as they can have that carve-out, Idlib on steroids, then they're happy, they're content with that. And America will keep them cobwebbed, keep them mothballed, and just release them just like they did in the terrorist corridors of Libya and other places, Sudan. And this is what they want, a perpetual terror factory. And to mention what Andrei said about how they're going to be firing from Bulgaria and Romania, this is what I meant. Russia and China will not be let alone to grow in peace. Right? If they don't not solve, but if they don't contribute to doing something meaningful in ending the slaughter in Palestine, they're not going to be allowed to emerge peacefully. They're going to be attacked any and all ways, and they're going to be forced to go out there with their carriers and return fire, and then that's going to take us to the same place of World War III. People don't see those connections, but that's what I see. And as far as the interview with Tucker Carlson, that's been a long time coming. I'm glad that it happened, and I was absolutely livid, and still am livid. I'm really pissed when you said that, they basically created a heart condition in you. And what I have to say, getting into the too much of the merits of the interview, which is magnificent. All I have to say is curse the ground those people work against, that walk upon, that harm the Honorable George Galloway, the Lady Gayatri Galloway, and Clan Galloway. May the water of the earth curse them, even in their own bodies. May the air that they breathe curse them, and even the sky that looked down upon them, may they be cursed. And not get away unscathed, whether it's that Mahmoud, Abbas, whatever her name is, Parface, whoever it is in the establishment that's attacking you.
Shabana Mahmoud, yeah.
You say Shabana, I say Mahmoud,
Shabana, you say tomato, I say tomato. Listen, it's only the hour that stops me, Robos, from exploring these things with you further. As always, you bring the show to, well, frankly, a majestic conclusion. I have now to take, for the rest of my life, 10 tablets a day, which, if I didn't have Gayatri, I frankly wouldn't be able to do. I have a heart arrhythmia of recent provenance, the words of my most eminent cardiologist. And you don't have to be Sherlock Holmes. As someone said, I'm giving off a Sherlock Holmes vibe. You don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to work out how a guy who never lost a day's work through illness in his life, and I've been working since I was 14 years old, I never lost a day through illness, and now I have to take 10 tablets every single day just to stay alive. Well, thank you for that beautiful call and for your beautiful thoughts. So what else could follow such a beautiful call but the beautiful Gayatri with her roundup? What's rattling, Gayatri?
So there is a man stuck in the darkest and deepest of Israeli dungeons. A man with a vision and a man with a voice. But most importantly, a man who has the support of all the Palestinians inside Gaza, in the West Bank, all over, to lead the struggle against Israeli occupation. This man is Marwan Barghouti. He is the most prominent Palestinian leader behind bars for 23 years. And when they captured him in 2002, he was an elected lawmaker. Now, he is indeed the Nelson Mandela of Palestine. And on the Day of Solidarity, 29 November, with Palestine, activists from across the world have relaunched the campaign to release Marwan Barghouti from his imprisonment. And I hereby declare that we support this, that we join this campaign, this global effort to free Marwan Barghouti. We want a free Palestine. We need a free Palestine. But it requires a leadership that can unite and galvanize the people and instigate this path to a free Palestine. And this torchbearer is Marwan Barghouti. So we call upon all the supporters of Palestine to name him, to carry his picture, and to always associate your solidarity with Palestine with the release of Marwan Barghouti. Because this leadership, this form, this person is super important. Can you please share with us the importance of a solidified international campaign with the struggle on the grounds, as per your first-hand experience in South Africa during apartheid?
Yeah, I can see that the plight of Marwan has upset you reading about it all. I saw you today shed a tear about him. He is a great hero, as Mandela was a great hero, and his fortitude, like Mandela's fortitude, requires us to act. People ask all the time, what can they do? Well, one of the main things they can do is do something to free Marwan Barghouti. We need a song. We had Free Nelson Mandela. We need a Free Marwan Barghouti song. We need his image everywhere, as recognizable as Mandela's image became. It wasn't, by the way, always as big as it became, but the closer we got to victory, the bigger the image of Mandela became. And this has got to be the case with Barghouti. Barghouti is the political son of Yasser Arafat. He is not Hamas. He is not Marxist-Leninist PFLP. He is a mainstream nationalist figure, like Mandela was. And that is the obvious thing that we need. We need a leader with credibility and integrity, neither of which the current so-called leadership of the Palestine National Authority has. In fact, I'm going to say that the prospect of the release of Marwan Barghouti horrifies the decrepit and corrupted leadership of the so-called Palestine National Authority. So that's why he's at the top of every prisoner exchange list. And that's why he never gets released. Because his release would electrify the Palestinian political spectrum. And his family, we know his family, we know his son, Arab Barghouti, is a regular guest of ours. His wife, in fact, hasn't one of the brothers married Miss Palestine?
Miss Palestine this year is Nadine Ayoub, and she is indeed the wife of not Arab, but Sharaf Barghouti. And she was the first to represent Palestine at this year's Miss Universe in Thailand. And in this clip, we see her standing there, this beauty queen, being sneered at and scowled at by Miss Israel. It caused quite a stir.
Really? Even in a Miss Universe. Anyway, you're absolutely right to raise this. We are going to spare no effort in making the name Marwan Barghouti as famous in the world as Nelson Mandela's name was famous before the victory. And that will help the victory. That will assist the victory. So it's good that you've raised it. This is the 23rd
year
now beginning the 24th year of his incarceration.
Yes.
Nelson Mandela served 27 years.
Correct.
Let's make sure that Marwan is released before that 27
We have time
years.
and technology on our side.
Yeah.
Which
Which
in
we didn't have
comparison
then, by the way.
with the Nelson Mandela.
How did I get a picture of Nelson Mandela out in Britain in the 1970s and 80s?
Yeah, by
Really
standing on
hard.
the streets
Yeah.
in the pouring rain.
Yeah.
So we have that advantage. So let's do it. Let's free Marwan
Let's
Barghouti.
get his picture and his name and the demand, free Marwan Barghouti everywhere.
Correct.
Now, they don't do chips in the country we are currently in, but if we hurry, I'll be able to take you for a cup of tea, at least.
May I at least close the show with calling out the big donors of tonight?
Of course.
Thank you all. Thank you for supporting the show through our website, moats.tv. Tonight's biggest donors are Douglas McFarland, Kenneth Morris, Mike Livesey, Rebecca Corrigan, and Thierry Laurence. You too can become one of the big, small, any donor. But if you want your name mentioned, go to the website, scan the QR code, and support the show.
Fantastic. It's been marvelous for us. I hope it was for you. I mean, we always try to get the best guests, and we always hope for the best callers. But I think tonight we maybe had the two best guests as a double act that we have ever had, and the calls have been in such numbers that I have to apologize if we didn't get through to you. It's been marvelous.
It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.